Coming into qualifying, it looked like Red Bull had the upper hand, and Verstappen was flying throughout the whole thing. Q3 came, and the first runs, and he's quite a long way up on the two Mercedes. It's actually Bottas ahead of Hamilton coming into the final runs of Q3. But the track evolution was pretty big. The track was cleaning up the whole time, and this caught out some drivers earlier on in qualifying. But in Q3, it meant the last runs was still very important. And Verstappen still had to find a bit of time to guarantee pole position. As it was super, super tight in the end, with Hamilton just 0.04 of a second behind. But it could have been a little bit more comfortable for Max. And this was a moment, the actual whole face of the race changed, because there was a couple of parts on Max Verstappen's qualifying lap right at the end where things didn't quite go to plan. It was a beautifully driven lap through the corners. He absolutely nailed it, but actually lost a bit of time on the straights compared to what he could have done otherwise. So let's have a look at what happened here. We're on board coming through into turn 2, and final run, it's all looking nice and neat. We go into turn 3, and now Verstappen's very, very quick through here. But as he comes through, he takes a short shift here. You can see the rev lights just go on, the blue lights, and they go off here because Max is short shifting. Because when you've got this amount of steering angle on, you just can't get on the throttle as you like. So when we go through, you see those blue lights go on. He's taking an upshift, then they come on again, and he's ready for the next upshift. But the problem here is he's having a big snap of oversteer. So he has this oversteer because he's still right on the limit of the traction, even with the first short shift. And he's had a bit of an oversteer, and now look, he's out on the curb and it's quite bumpy. So what he does is takes the upshift, and the rev lights go off again. We can see that he does pull the upshift. But what he's actually done is he's taken 2 upshifts. So as we play it through at fast speed, you can hear the sound of this. It just sounds really boggy for Verstappen. He's taken 2 upshifts, and now that means that he loses time all the way down that straight. And whilst he's driven the corners really well, he's lost a little bit of that gain through turn 3 by pulling the extra upshift. And it's allowed Hamilton to get a little bit closer there. Finally, the end of the lap, and something else happens that makes this a little bit tighter than it should have been. Now, this corner, I love the look of from Verstappen. It was part of the whole pole lap, which was exhilarating. But right up to the inside curb, doesn't want to take it because it'll unsettle the car. But then if we play this through to the outside now as well, right at the end of the lap, he knows that this is all or nothing for pole position, and pole position at this circuit, particularly for Max Verstappen, means so much. But look at this, right to the outside of the circuit as well. I don't think he's left a millimetre of space on the outside before he's going to be in the gravel there. You can see almost the bulge of the tyre is actually over the gravel here. The contact patch more on the inside is still in contact with the curb, and that's what's giving him the traction moving forward. But he has absolutely maximised what he can do through this final corner. It's really, really quick, and actually maybe saves him that pole position. So we come around the final corner, and the job should be basically done. Here he goes, and now you can see up here, DRS. This here is the line coming up that he wants to do. So look at Max's left index finger, and you can now just see he goes for the DRS, and he's done this all weekend. It should be fairly routine. And presses it as he goes over the line, but it doesn't work. And this bit here, if we just play it through, you can just see, there it goes. So he has pressed the button, but it's not engaged the DRS. Now I wondered if he'd actually pressed the button slightly too early, possibly, but freeze framing it, it looks like it's pretty much bang on the white line. And this is something that's fairly routine for the drivers, because again, they've done this through the whole weekend. You want to put it on the line to maximise the time you can open that rear wing and take a bit of extra speed. And you know as a driver as well if you press it before, because normally there's a tone or something that will let you know if the DRS is pressed, and Max didn't realise here that the DRS is not open. So he drives to the line and takes his pole position, but it's only later we see that Hamilton's got very, very close with the fastest final sector. So if we have a look then at the pole lap against the second place lap, it's Verstappen and Hamilton on the telemetry. And you can see a couple of things jump out. Firstly, Verstappen is super quick through the corners. And if we zoom into this part, these 3 corners particularly here, and look how far up all these minimum speeds are for Verstappen in the blue against Hamilton in the red. He's basically able to carry more speed through all of these corners. Hamilton's actually slightly quicker into all of them, but that minimum speed gain is significant for Verstappen. And actually, it's the similar trait in turns 2 and 3, where he takes the bulk of the time, and we can see that down here. That's the time gain, and you can see where it's going up, Verstappen's quicker. So this is earlier on in the lap, and Verstappen is very, very quick through turn 2 and then turn 3, where he has his moment on the exit. But look at that, quicker in, minimum speed's quicker, and then he's looking like he's going to be quicker out. But then on the exit of this turn 3 is where some problems come for him. You can see here, look at the upshifts on the blue. That's this part up here. And you can see suddenly Max takes the first short shift, but then takes these 2 in a row here. And that is where suddenly he's lost acceleration compared to Lewis. And if we zoom out again, you can then see in this phase here, you can just see the red line gets quite a long way up then for the rest of the straight. It doesn't cost Max a huge amount, but it is probably it's a half a tenth or so. But maybe actually, given Max was quicker to full throttle and better at the start of the straight, possibly it could have been a little bit more. And that's when this line here just starts to come back down in favour of Hamilton. So when it's coming down, it's Hamilton quicker. The end of the lap is the other one that's quite a big change. This bit here, the Mercedes just lights up over the finish line, and the Red Bull just doesn't have the acceleration. Now that is the DRS there that Verstappen has. In fact, it's not all the DRS. Mercedes maybe was slightly quicker at this stage anyway, if you look at the start of the lap there. But at the end of the lap, it's again cost Max a little bit of time. He's done a very good job through the corners. The car's obviously working very, very nicely, but it's just enough to get him over the line and save pole by just 0.04 of a second in the end. Super close. Maybe it should have been more like a tenth and a half, or closer to 0.2 possibly of gain over Hamilton, but it was almost enough to give Lewis the pole position, which would have changed the whole outcome of the race, but not quite. Mercedes basically said they were going to split the strategy after Saturday qualifying, given the situation they were in, and that's exactly what they did. But they couldn't put Verstappen under enough pressure. But was there a moment where they could have done? I think there was a couple of times a couple of chances they had. Now, this is the graph here that shows the gaps of the top 3 through the whole race. So you've got Verstappen in the blue, the first turquoise is Hamilton, and the dotted turquoise is Bottas on his one stopper until the end. And firstly, you can see Verstappen and Hamilton basically pit in the first phase up here. That's Hamilton pitting from about 3.5 seconds back from Verstappen. The very next lap, Max pits to cover him off. Now, Christian Horner said afterwards, no matter what they did, Mercedes were going to split the strategies. Verstappen was going to be covering Hamilton. It's the sort of thing that makes sense now for Red Bull, that we know are focusing more on the driver's title than the constructors. They're going to cover off Lewis Hamilton. So if Bottas then had the better strategy, then it's Valtteri who's got a great chance to win the race. As it happened, it was the two-stopper that was the quicker one. And it meant that this phase here was crucial. This is where Bottas now is slowing on the end of his one-stopper, with Verstappen and Hamilton closing in. And the gap is actually pretty close. You can see the gap from Verstappen to Hamilton there is greater than Verstappen to Hamilton here. The Mercedes is better on the medium tyres in the second stint, and he's able to keep closer to Verstappen. And it's very tight as Max passes Valtteri for the lead of the race. Could Bottas have held on a little bit longer? That's going to be one question that Mercedes would have been really hoping that he could at least maybe stay another lap, or at least make Verstappen fight into turn 1. But when Verstappen catches Bottas, Valtteri goes in a little bit deep at the chicane, and it just allows Max to get really close. And actually, it's one of the most simple passes in the whole Grand Prix for the lead of the race. And Mercedes were desperate for Bottas to interact with the race leaders and basically, hopefully, scupper Verstappen for a couple of laps. Max had a little bit of dirty air for a few corners, but with that mistake into the chicane, Verstappen got super close, made a really easy pass, and that was Bottas' moment at the Grand Prix gone basically there. And from then, he never had a chance to help out his teammate. But could Mercedes at this point have done something different with Hamilton, who was already at this point going to be on a two-stopper? The next bit for me is this crucial phase in this part, which is the second pit stop window. Now at this point, you've got Hamilton about 1.5 seconds away from Verstappen there, but Mercedes keep him a little bit too long. And by the time he actually pits here, you can see that gap has just picked up. Verstappen's picked up the pace. Hamilton's come through a little bit of traffic and maybe been affected worse. And then he pits. So the timing of the pit stop here is not good for Hamilton. On top of that, when he emerges, he's straight into traffic, so he cannot do a really, really fast outlap because he's coming through a couple of cars. And it means that once again, Verstappen and Red Bull cover the next lap. And from here, it's basically job done for the Grand Prix. There's nothing more that Mercedes can do. They've done their stop, and it's just hoping that Lewis can produce some magic on the track, which on a circuit that's difficult to overtake against a Red Bull that's maybe the quicker car, it's very difficult to do. But had Mercedes pitted Hamilton a couple of laps earlier, when he was just 1.5 seconds away from Verstappen, would that have given them a chance to put pressure on Red Bull? I think it would have done. The undercut there, 1.5 seconds, is enough to make it really squeaky for Red Bull. Verstappen would have had tyres that were quite fresh. We could see here that he could raise his own pace when he had to, but it's still a lot closer from 1.5 seconds back to 3 seconds back, which it was in the space of 2 or 3 laps. From there, it's basically the same gap as it was in the first case, and we know Red Bull covered that one off well. Having said all of that, it was a tricky one for Mercedes. Basically, Bottas wasn't quick enough to genuinely help in the fight, and whilst Perez wasn't there, it ended up just being a showdown between Hamilton and Verstappen. Verstappen had the better pace, and Red Bull just called the strategy well. So that was a look at the race at the front, Red Bull and Mercedes. Was there anything Mercedes could have done? Maybe not in this case, but there were plenty of other moments further back as well. We had Sergio Perez on a recovery drive after that poor qualifying. We have Fernando Alonso with a brilliant first lap, and some bad luck for Antonio Giovinazzi. Check it out on F1 TV.